Hello, everyone. I'm Sister Vassa, and welcome back to Coffee with Sister Vassa. I haven't made a YouTube video for you for a while now, my friends, because I've been writing a book about the liturgy of the hours and of the days according to Byzantine tradition. It's for lay people who want to find a way to pray the hours and also the days of the week, in between Sundays also, in their busy schedule and despite a busy schedule. So wait for that book. I hope that some of you will find some use for it. But in the meantime, I am providing a podcast as Lent approaches, and throughout Lent, we have a podcast on patreon.com/Sister Vassa. And if you're interested in being accompanied as far as our podcast goes through this season, then do join us. On Mondays, we have this podcast discussing the pre-Lenten preparation and also the whole structure and journey and the scripture passages and traditions of Lent. But this special episode of Coffee with Sister Vassa, I am posting for you because of the present crisis in Ukraine, because this war that has begun just recently between two traditionally Orthodox nations has engendered a lot of questions from people. I have received many messages asking me, well, how is this possible? And what does Orthodoxy in general have to say about this or that aspect of this conflict? And so, of course, we have the guidance of our bishops encouraging us to pray for peace. And we certainly are increasing our prayers, not only because of this crisis, but also the intense prayer and fasting season of Lent coming up, but also from the aspect of Orthodox theology, as this does happen to be a conflict between two traditionally Orthodox peoples. And it's not the first conflict between Orthodox peoples in the 21st century. In fact, there was such a conflict not so long ago between Georgia and the Russian Federation. And we have seen divisions on a different level, on a canonical level, amongst Orthodox churches happening on an international level and involving situations in Africa, for example. You know that there is a clash in Africa between the ancient Alexandrian Patriarchate and the not so ancient Patriarchate of my beloved church, the Russian Orthodox Church. This involves referring to church canons. I mean, canons, not with three N's, but with two N's. And the discussion and disputes that surround issues that have arisen there are of a canonical nature, and certain church canons are referred to and specified as a motive for a certain incursion onto territory that is traditionally not that of, say, my church. And if we've observed these church disputes going on an international level in our time, maybe some questions have also arisen as to why or how this could happen between Orthodox Christians. So in today's video, I will have a discussion with someone who is an expert on Orthodox ecclesiology, Father Archimandrite Cyril Hovorun, who has been a guest on this show many times throughout the years. And he is author of, amongst other books, of this book called Political Orthodoxies, the Unorthodoxies of the Church Coerced. So he is an expert on questions involving certain political situations throughout church history and the ecclesiology of the church and how these have been interconnected and what sorts of ideologies really can arise from a certain kind of not very felicitous intertwining of politics with Orthodox Christian faith. But before we get to our conversation with Father Kirill, my friends, I will remind you that as we prepare for Lent, you might want to look into our popular Healthy Fast Lenten guidebook for Lent that has meal plans prepared in collaboration with certified nutritionist Denise Canelos, with Lenten meal plans and nutrition tips, and also a daily reflection on scripture or on a Lenten prayer that are written by me for every day of Lent and of this pre-Lenten season. And also you can get our popular mug, the 2022 mug that you might want to use during Lent. Faith versus fear every day of the year. That's what our fun 2022 mug says. And we also have other books for you that you might be interested in if you would like to be accompanied through Lent by reading one of these. It's also a way to support our Coffee with Sister Vassa online mission. So check it out at the gift shop at coffeewithsistervassa.com. And now, without any further ado, let's talk to Father Kirill, who lives in Kiev and will chat with us about Orthodoxy, Ukraine, and war. Hello, Father Kirill. Welcome back to our show.
Hello, Sister Vassa, and I greet also your audiences, your zillions.
Thanks for greeting our audience. To the people at home who might not know, Father Kirill is an old friend of mine. He's been on our YouTube show several times throughout the years, and now he's here to talk to us about these recent events, these very tragic and shocking events to which we woke up on February 24th in the morning, learning that there was a Russian military invasion into Ukraine. It wasn't an entire surprise to us, but the extent to which it actually happened, I think, was heartbreaking to anybody paying attention. So this invasion, to anyone who might not have heard of it in some way, I think everybody's heard of it by now, has happened by land and sea and air. And you know that missiles were fired to where Father Kirill lives, in the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And President Putin has said that the goal was the demilitarization and bizarrely denazification. I was getting to that. The bizarre, denazification of a Ukraine that does have a Jewish president and Ukraine that lost 8 million people fighting the Nazis in World War II. So there are puzzling things to what is happening. This is being recorded, by the way, my friends, on Thursday. So perhaps by the time I post this video on the Coffee with Sister Vassa YouTube channel, things may have radically changed. In any event, many people have been asking me, and Father Kirill, I will direct this question towards you. People have been asking me online, Sister, isn't President Putin a Russian Orthodox Christian? And as this invasion of a traditionally Orthodox people is happening by a nation that is traditionally also Orthodox, is there something about dealing with one another and having such a policy, whatever it is that's being really accomplished here by President Putin? Is there something Orthodox about this or Russian Orthodox about this? And in any event, what does Orthodoxy have to say about all of this, whatever it is? Father Kirill, you as an expert in ecclesiology, as well as someone who is Ukrainian, someone who is Orthodox, very well known in the Orthodox world as a powerful thinker on issues concerning the whole mystery of the church, the history of the church, and ecclesiology. Share your thoughts with us. You just go and share your thoughts with us with, where is this coming from?
Yeah, right. Well, thank you first of all for inviting me to your show. And you did this exactly in the first day of the invasion. It seems to be like the longest day in my life personally. I just realized that it happened just today, and my feeling is that months have passed since today's morning, and this is really something. Even though we were warned about this invasion, about this war, by President Biden. As you know, he many times publicly said that the war is possible, is even inevitable. We refuse to believe until the moment it happened, and still it is like, I personally feel like a dream. I want to wake up, and I realize I cannot. During this long day, I've learned a lot of stories already. It came to my mind. It's like those small tragedies described by Alexander Pushkin, his famous trilogy, Small Tragedies. And now we are dealing not with a trilogy. We are dealing with thousands, maybe millions of small tragedies, which are not small. They are big tragedies of small people, people who, live their lives, enjoy themselves. Yes, they were worried about how things would evolve. No one really expected, no one really believed that something like that would have happened. Myself, even though, yes, I believe I'm quite kind of realistic, and I try to be cautious. And I warned very early my followers of the social media: be prepared, prepare your emergency suitcases, bags, design your escape routes, and so forth. And we did the same with my family. I was really shocked, as well as every single Ukrainian, and we had to do with my family huge things today, like to make sure that my family is evacuated. We had to leave our house in Ukraine. My brother went to the military commissariat, right? How do you call it? The agency that recruits soldiers.
Your brother,
yeah,
just to be clear, your brother's signing up, right?
Yeah, he's signing up
Going to
for
serve
the
in the military
service.
to defend Ukraine.
Exactly. And we didn't
God
suspect.
bless him, right? So let's pray for Father Kirill's brother.
Yeah, well, and for every Ukrainian actually who is.
Of course.
And many people have lost their lives today. We still don't know how many. We are talking about dozens of people, actually on both sides. And it's a day of huge human loss. And today will be probably not fewer losses of human life. And we don't know when it will end. So this is really something unthinkable. This is unbelievable. And even though, yes, we've lived through this situation since 2014, when, as we believe, as we call it, the first wave of the Russian aggression started against Ukraine, when Crimea was annexed and the war was waged in the eastern part of Ukraine. This is by far a more serious invasion.
Well, I'll just say for the folks at home, 2014, my friends at home, in case you don't know, Crimea was annexed by Russia. And after that, there was the self-proclamation of these two regions that you might have heard about, these self-proclaimed People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk,
yeah,
that have been in the news this past week. Those two regions. Anyway, I'm not going to say more, but they were, after the annexation of Crimea, the rebels there, self-proclaimed as being independent from Ukraine, but those are Ukrainian territories according to international law.
As well as Crimea, yeah.
Exactly. As well as Crimea, that's right.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, so this is a new wave of the conflict, a new wave of aggression, which, well, we don't know which can be fatal for the Ukrainian democracy, or if Ukrainian democracy endures it, then it will be a dramatic change in the European on the European political landscape, and well, it will be a dramatic change anyways, whether we lose or we prevail eventually. And certainly, the things first, our relations with Russia will never be the same. Europe will never be the same. Today, it was a day also of reflections about how things have changed, and the life will be different on the European continent. That's for sure. And we just need to make some sense of what is going on, if there is any sense, and to make also some theological reflection. Thank you for asking me about the kind of theological frame, how we could frame this absurd, which is happening, which is going on in theological terms. And I think there is a way to frame this war in theological terms. And I try to do this in my own publications. I think that the language developed by the recent modern political theology is helpful to describe what is going on, particularly the language which was developed in the West in the frame of the post-war political theology, something that people call the theology after Auschwitz. It has been called like that by Jürgen Moltmann, a famous German political theologian who lived personally also through the experience of World War II as a young man. And then he realized that it was a horrible experience, and he tried to to make sense out of that, and he developed essentially a theology which influenced many other political theologians in our time, including the Orthodox ones. And it's probably time for Orthodox theologians to use this language, these ideas, these philosophical frames to describe what is going on. Well, yes, it is a tragedy, but this tragedy, I hope, gives us an opportunity to develop a sort of political theology which can be uniquely Orthodox and can be helpful for us, for our people, to understand where we are and what we can do about that. And I believe that indeed this war has been underpinned by not by religion per se, not but by Orthodoxy per se, but by different forms of abusing Orthodoxy, what I call political Orthodoxy. And I've described this in my book,
Okay,
Political Orthodoxy.
I'm going to back up a little bit. What I'm asking is, what does Orthodox theology and Orthodox thinking have to say about the bigger questions of war, expansionism, and perhaps national identity, all of this whole bundle of issues that seems to be coming to the fore in a very passionate way, and I'm afraid a hugely violent way. Share some thoughts about perhaps what you've written so eloquently about various political theologies.
Thank you for asking this. I think this is a very relevant question, and I could respond to that in this way. Indeed, our Orthodoxy, our tradition, has emerged from the framework of the symphonic relationship between the church and the state, from the empires. For most of our history, we, the Orthodox, lived in the relationship with the empires, under the shadow of the empires, as a part of the imperial projects. And it seems that these shadows still haunt us, and they still underpin many movements, political movements of our political leaders. I mean, the Orthodox, the political leaders who pretend to be Orthodox, and certainly influence the way how people in the church think about their states, about their countries, about their political leadership, about their churches. And this question is relevant to ecclesiology that you mentioned in the beginning. Indeed, is the church destined to be in relationship with the state? Is the church to secure the imperial resentment, to serve imperial projects, or it can be and should be something different? I think in the crisis in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, what is at stake is exactly this idea. Is the church a servant or a part of the imperial projects? Or it can be different from the empire, and actually can be against the imperial projects. I just want to remind, there was a kind of revealing and programmatic address made by President Putin just before the invasion. This was on the 21st of February, I believe, where he described in his almost 1 hour long lecture the way how he sees the relations between Russia and Ukraine, and where he suggested his own kind of historiographical concept, the concept of history. And this concept, I watched carefully this address, this lecture, if you want, and I saw in his historiography kind of clear and blunt apologetics of empire, of the imperial way of thinking, of the imperial way of doing things and living political life. He certainly envisaged an empire which he wants to restore, and he believes that Ukraine is not compatible. Well, it's not complying with this vision, and this imperial thinking really underpinned his vision. And I think it's something that attracts a lot of Orthodox people as well. People who think that yes, empire is probably monarchy is probably the best way for the Orthodox people to organize themselves, and that's why Putin has such a tremendous following, right? Many followers among the Orthodox. And I think this vision is outdated, and certainly it's wrong for the present circumstances. And I just want to remind the social doctrine of the Russian Church that stresses, which was adopted in 2000, which stresses that the monarchy, the imperial way of organizing political life, is not the best. Is not necessarily the best one. There could be many other ways. And essentially, Ukraine during its recent history as a modern state, chose a different model of organizing itself, a democratic model, truly Republican model of life. And it's something that certainly Putin wants to crush. And again, this has to do with the way how the Orthodox perceive. In Ukraine, the increasing number of the Orthodox see as a norm, a democratic way of organizing political life, not necessarily imperial. There is also another thing that I want to stress in relation to that. As I watched the address of Putin, he certainly doesn't believe in the power of people. He believes in the power of political elites, of political leaders. He believes that it's up to the leaders to decide the fate of the people, what they need to follow. That's exactly the reason why he tried to slam the opposition in Russia, why he imprisoned Navalny and other leaders of opposition. He doesn't believe that the people of Russia is eligible to decide.
Eligible, right. It's interesting that some of the people I've heard speak about this, church people in the West, just people I happen to know, say in the New York area also, they seem to confuse the terms, even though these are flexible terms, conservative and liberal. In Russia, they project onto Russia their understanding of what liberal and conservative means in America. And they think someone like Navalny, for simply what he's standing up for is really simply his right to run for office. He's a politician. He's not this revolutionary. He's a politician. And according to the original constitution, anyway, of the Russian Federation, he has every right to simply run for office and let the people decide, right?
Right.
But people seem to think, the strong sort of power that destroys opposition that seems to be, I don't want to offend anybody out there, but it's definitely been the autocratic tendency of, the amendments to the Constitution and so forth that have occurred. For anybody who's been paying attention knows about this. The autocratic tendency seems to be, in American eyes that are pro the Putin regime, they seem to think, oh, conservative means, family values, Christian stuff, somehow Orthodox, and all of that is conservative, right? But liberal is democracy, whereas traditionally in the United States, those who were strongly for the American Constitution, for American values, those were the conservatives.
The Republicans, exactly.
Yeah.
Hence is the name of the party, the Republican Party.
So it's upside
not the
down.
monarchical party. Yes, exactly.
I was born and raised in the United States. I don't think that being pro freedom of speech, the way that our church was able to thrive in the United States, nobody cared. There was no, Russians find this hard to believe, there was no government pressure on our church. I'm from the ROCOR. The way we thrived, we're able to have our own microcosm all the time, and still do, in the United States. Nobody ever thought that that was a liberal thing to value, religious freedoms and freedom of speech, and to value the American Constitution or constitutional rule of law, to say, no, the executive, the autocrat, can redefine laws, he can control the judiciary branch and control the courts. That would not be, a conservative thing to value. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Oh, that's a very good point. And I just want to jump on in briefly that indeed, I believe because of that, the kind of resemblance between the Russian agenda, conservative agenda, and the American conservative agenda is very superficial in its root. In their roots, they are very different, because the American conservative agenda is republicanist. It's about we are the people. And the Russian agenda, conservative agenda by Putin, first of all, it's not pro-family, because he is a divorced man. He just dumped his wife, and who knows how he lives, whatever.
Did not divorce her. He said that he was never married to her, the mother of his two daughters. He said they were never married. So they split up from a non-marriage. So this is
another sort of non-marriage, and he stands for
family values.
For family values, exactly.
And we're not going to talk about the other wives. You know what I'm saying? And then when you see somebody like Alexei Navalny, who is this very famously
devoted to his family,
very devoted to his family, two beautiful children, this very devoted wife, and so forth, and people will try to float, I'm not sure if this is some kind of propaganda in the West, but they try to float that Navalny is all about being pro-gay or something. Navalny is interested in being anti-corruption and pro-democracy. He's not interested in these things that we're obsessed with in the United States or in the West.
I think you are right that it is really a propaganda. It is a very clear propaganda. And I think what Putin does with many other issues, not just this one, which enchants somehow the Republicans in the United States, he uses and abuses. He manipulates those issues. He doesn't believe those issues himself, and he's a master of pretending, of appeasing different groups of people in order to use them. That's why he appears to be like a Marxist to all those leftist regimes in Latin America, like in Venezuela or in Cuba or wherever else, or in Europe. And he is liked by the opposites of the leftists in the United States, by very conservative, anti-leftist, anti-socialist, whatever folks. And this is really a thing, unbelievable thing, that the same person appeases and appeals to groups which are incompatible with one another, ideologically, politically. The same he does to the church, I believe. Even though he pretends to be an Orthodox, he pretends to be a Christian. I don't believe he is a Christian. Well, I personally believe he is anti-Christian to a great extent, because he distorts the idea of Christianity. He really plays the church. And the problem is that the church allows him to play it. I believe that
what does President Putin believe in then?
Well, that's a very good point. He never revealed what he believes himself. There are different external testimonies, witnesses who testified about his faith. And they are rather negative about his faith. I just want to mention his former friend, a Russian kind of bank owner in exile, Pugachev, who is famous to be like an Orthodox oligarch, whatever. And he testified about Putin's faith as non-existent. And in my belief, in my opinion, his spirituality, his religiosity is non-Orthodox. It's peculiar. It reflects more, this sort of post-Soviet or late Soviet spirituality, religiosity, which is very dualistic, which is very cheap, superstitious. In the address that I mentioned before on the 21st of February, that somehow preceded the invasion to Ukraine, he somehow revealed what he really believes. And as I watched him, I realized that his religiosity, his spirituality, his way of believing is non-Orthodox in the way that it is closer, much closer to, Gnostic, dualistic way of practicing or, living one's faith. He sees the world in black and white. He certainly sees Russia as, the incarnation of the good, of the goodness, of the essential goodness.
Russia is the incarnation of the good, right?
Of the goodness, yeah, the ontological goodness, like the essential, the thing of goodness. Russia is the incarnation, the thing that goodness is embodied in. And he sees the West, particularly the NATO and the United States, as the incarnation of evil. And that's why he believes that the West and Russia are incompatible. Whatever they try to do, whatever the Western leaders try to, to tell him, to persuade him to cooperate, to be more cooperative. They don't understand that his worldview is different from theirs. This worldview is dualistic. He sees the world in black and white. This is really a Manichaean worldview. And for him, Ukraine is kind of a lost thing between this global, self-aware evil of the West and the cosmic goodness of Russia. And he wants, essentially, he believes that he is saving Ukraine from itself. He's saving Ukraine from the West. And he is ready to save Ukraine by consuming, by killing it, essentially. He sees his mission as almost like cosmic, if you want. And this is a distorted religious consciousness. He's not a pragmatic. Many Western leaders see him as a pragmatist, as a very kind of down-to-earth personality, but he is not. He's really a metaphysical personality to a great extent, but this metaphysics is not Orthodox. It's unorthodox. It's Gnostic. It's I don't want to, overstretch. I would say I would say that he is just a small man from the post-Soviet era or from the late Soviet era. In the beginning, he was an atheist. He did not have any spirituality. He was brought up as an atheist. And then he discovered some sort of spirituality, as many other people of his generation discovered, through different quasi-religious movements, Gnostic movements. There were plenty of them who practiced, sorts of magics, they had many superstitious things and believed in them and still believe in them. People in the West probably don't understand this kind of spirituality, but we who lived in the Soviet time, I personally remember this very, very well. How people were, they kind of converted from atheism to a quasi-religious self-consciousness, quasi-religious practices, which were very close to Gnostic. And essentially, Putin retained this kind of spirituality. Yes, superficially, he may, make his cross. He may, stand in the services of the patriarch, whatever. But I believe that his Christianity is very superficial and it's dubious is heretical. And
Thank you,
that's it.
Father
Actually, if I may just end this idea, and that is the reason, I think one of the reasons, probably not the only one, but one of the reasons of his violence. That's why he believes that he can use the church to his political ends. He can kill people in the name of his ideas, religiously colored, as it were. I mean, that is a truly religious person, a truly Christian, cannot do things that he does, cannot go
Right.
to a war, cannot kill people.
Sometimes, again, not to, offend anybody, but sometimes it's really disturbing and simply sad to observe what we call in Russian the hamstva. We don't have an English word for hamstva. It comes from the name of Ham,
Yeah.
one of the sons of Noah, who was the son who did not turn away from Noah's nakedness when Noah, the biblical Noah, everybody, drank wine for the first time, not knowing the effects of wine, was lying naked in his tent, and Ham laughed at his father instead of covering him up, as did his two other brothers, Sem and Japheth. Anyway, so to be rude, especially disrespectful of people who are due respect, is known as Hamism or hamstva in Russian.
Yeah.
So
I think President Biden today called him a bully.
The spirit of insulting everybody, being hugely disrespectful, that's been noticed by so many people in Russian diplomacy, the foreign service and diplomats, whether it's Sergei Lavrov or whether it's Maria Zakharova, they're famously rude, and then when Putin says something like in the wake of this Ukrainian invasion, he actually threatened the West with the atomic bomb if they interfere.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that to use threats like that, is also just not even disrespectful. It's just, it's preposterous. It's preposterous.
Yeah. It is insane. It is mad. And this is exactly, I think we can explain his ideas by seeing him as a person with kind of who thinks in cosmic terms, who thinks in the way how the ancient Manichaeans or Gnostics thought. They were perceiving the world in the same way, as a global fight, almost in the, Dostoevsky also perceived, the world in the same terms. As a kind of global fight. And it was, okay, it was an early Christian perception. Let us remember Apostle Paul, who said that our fight is not against the начало власти of this world, but about the demonic powers of the world. The Gnostic perception is slightly different. The Gnostic perception is not about, fighting the evil embodied, in demons, in the demonic powers. It's a dualistic perception, exactly, which perceives the world as divided into two parts. One part, a physical part of the world, is physically evil, and another part of the world, you can call it physical. The Gnostics perceived it like a physical part of the world. Putin may perceive it as a geopolitical, part of the world. One geopolitical part of the world is essentially evil. Another one is ontologically good, as Russia. And he sees his mission as helping the good part of the world to prevail over the evil part of the world. He actually believes that the West is very corrupt. The West is very much hypocritical. Probably it's true to some extent. And he believes that this hypocrisy, this evilness of the West, stems from its very nature. That's my kind of reading of him. And that's why he sees that in this cosmic fight against this global evil, all instruments are good because they serve the good end. That's why, otherwise you cannot explain him. If you take him as a pragmatist, as a politician, a normal kind of a modern politician, you cannot understand him. That's why many people in the West could not believe that he could do what he has done to Ukraine, what he is doing to Ukraine right now. But when seen from this religious perspective, then you can probably explain better his behavior. And this is a very bad, very evil metaphysics, religiosity that he is driven by.
Well, I have to mention the elephant in the room. Where is the Russian church in this whole thinking and in this all of these policies and in this attitude towards also the West? Because, you know, for a lot of people who are also Russian Orthodox, but don't live in Russia, but live in the West, well, we're part of that, those of us who are born and raised in that. So I'd like to hear from you. Let's get away from President Putin and say, what is the church thinking?
Well, the official church keeps silent about the events in Ukraine, as you know. And I don't know what will happen tomorrow, but as of now, 24th of February, the Patriarch has not made any statement. And the officials of the Russian church also keep silent. And
well,
I should remind—
Metropolitan Onufri made a statement in Ukraine.
That's true. Well, of course, in Ukraine, in order to survive, he cannot keep silent. That's very clear. I mean, as the church, because people are so much upset.
Okay, Father Kirill, but I'm thinking more about, again, I want to return to talking about Russian Orthodoxy, of which I am a part and love very much. I want to talk about how is this, say, expansionism and empire kind of thinking, right? How is it perhaps spilling into the way that we as the Russian Orthodox Church perhaps deal with the rest of Orthodoxy? Do you see perhaps this kind of expansionist thinking spilling into the way the church deals internationally, perhaps recent events in Africa? Is there a kind of, well, they're not us, or we've established that they're not on our side, say the Greeks, right? And everything is allowed now for us because they're not on our side. And maybe we've labeled them as Westerners. I don't know if the Greeks qualify as part of the West.
Well, they are the members of the NATO anyways.
Oh, okay. So I want to ask a provocative question. Again, this might offend some people, but everything offends everybody online anyway. But I think the elephant in the room, as far as this conversation goes with the Russian church and the Russian state and expansionism, well, do you see a connection to what's going on in Africa in the way there's been what anybody that knows anything about canon law would think a very serious trespassing across a border that's been there from the very beginning of any kind of Orthodox canon law?
Well, that's exactly, I think it's very clear and obvious that there is a connection, there are parallels, just like in the case with the traditional values. Those who promote traditional values and pretend to protect them, they violate them often in the first place. The same is with the canons, like in Africa. They say that they do it in the
same as what? With what? With the canons?
With Africa, yes, with the canons attitudes to the canons in Africa. They say that they do it, the expansion to Africa, in the name of the canons of the church, right? To protect the purity of the canonical tradition of the church. And they violate the basic canons of our church, like the canons that postulate, the rights of the Alexandrian Patriarchate in that region. And they're basic. I mean, they were adopted by the same Council of Nicaea that adopted our creed, Christian creed.
Right. And for anybody, for the folks at home who might not know, there was this event that happened when the Alexandrian Patriarchate, you see, my friends at home, in case you don't know, Orthodoxy has 5 old patriarchates known as the Pentarchy. So this goes back to, well, we should say the 5th century, if we want to look at these 5, right?
Yeah, it was kind of mature. The system was matured by the time of the 5th Ecumenical Council, more or less, and
right.
So, and before that, Chalcedon. Yeah.
So because of the split with Rome, Rome is not in this list anymore, but it was Rome, Alexandria, Constantinople.
Constantinople, Alexandria.
Well, Constantinople, when Constantinople arises,
Alexandria was
place,
exactly. You're right.
but
Yes.
Alexandria was second. So
That's correct.
there's Constantinople, then there's Antioch, and actually later than one would expect, Jerusalem, because Emperor Adrian had had built a different city, Aelia Capitolina, in place of Jerusalem. Anyway, Jerusalem is late to becoming actually even an archdiocese. It was subject to Caesarea Maritima. Anyway, all of that is not that important, but what's important is that that's such an old, what Father Kirill would call part of the scaffolding of the structures of the Orthodox Church, that the place of Alexandria, whether it's number 2 or 3, doesn't matter. It's as old, really, as Orthodox administrative structures as we know them, in the whole era of Byzantium. What happened was, because the Alexandrian Patriarchate in our day recognized the legitimacy of the Ukrainian autocephaly, we're not going to get into what that is, right? But they recognized it, and my beloved church, the Russian Orthodox Church, was very upset about that. They said, well, now that the Alexandrian Patriarchate is not on our side, they turned this into a permission. We have done this. I take responsibility as well, just because I'm a very little small brick in that wall, but still. We decided that it's okay to trespass on their territory and take over any parishes that want to join us. And we say, they asked. And then we point things out, like maybe you guys read about this online, my viewers, but we even say, I think very cynically, well, look at these Africans, that they have dire conditions, and we're going to build them nice churches. Now it's like some kind of a charity, like some kind of a charitable action. But it was all initiated because I'm trying to make a connection, Father Kirill, if maybe it's incorrect, but I'm trying to make a connection to this. Those are the bad guys. So everything's allowed, even though it's really hard to say how that's allowable. It doesn't make the Alexandrian Patriarch a heretic that he recognizes an autocephaly. Anyway, so this is happening in Africa, everybody. If you don't care about it.
I just want to say, they do it not because, the Russian Church doesn't do it because the others are wrong, I believe, somewhere deeply, but because it believes it can do it. Just like Putin, he doesn't do it because he doesn't believe that the international law is not applicable anymore to him, to Russia, or to Ukraine, to other countries, but he does it because he believes that he can. And I also would like to stress that, yes, many people believe, and the documents of the Russian Church state that the Russian Church went to Africa because the Alexandrian Patriarchate had recognized the Ukrainian autocephalous Church. But I believe it was not the reason. It was a pretext for the extension. The real reason for this extension, this kind of advance to Africa, was exactly this kind of imperial thinking. And this is another irony. Just like, with the, fighting for the canons. Well, in the name of the canons, they violate canons. Or in the name of the traditional values, they violate other traditional values like life itself, not to say about family, life and stuff. They also say they fight against the Greek colonialism, but essentially they promote their own colonialism, their own kind of imperial policies to Africa, which concur with Putin's policies in Africa. As we know, Putin now offers his services to local autocratic, sometimes quite totalitarian regimes, quite kind of harsh dictatorships, to protect them from their own people. And here we can also see the part that Putin doesn't believe in the people. He believes in the leadership. He believes that the leadership is always right, even if leadership is they're completely crooks. They are completely incapable, incompetent. They oppress and kill their own people. He doesn't care.
Right.
In Africa, or in Ukraine, or in Russia.
Okay. So I want to really break this down and get to the point, because I think we might be a little bit confused about, you did say initially that Putin believed in his heart that the West was evil. it's a different thing that you're saying now, I think. It's maybe
Yes,
they go
go
parallel,
ahead.
but it's different to say, no, all of that, good versus evil actually doesn't matter, because he believes, or this whole way of thinking, it doesn't matter if it's a church representative in this mindset, whether it's Putin himself, maybe it's some kind of post-Soviet phenomenon of somebody perhaps who was not fully converted after that horrible, dark period of atheism in Russia. Maybe this is just, I want to propose this theory.
Hypothesis.
What I'm hearing from you, that actually there's a cynical underlying, simply, we want more. We want the empire. That's different. That's basically power hunger. That's thirst for power. That's thirst for conquest. It's very primitive, right? Yeah. And that's what's going on. But we have pretexts, whether it's in Lugansk and Donetsk, pretending that there's some Ukrainians that blew up a Jeep in an empty parking lot, whether pretending that there were какие-то там диверсанты, or I don't know who it was, claiming that they are the aggressors. And then when we establish whether it's, I don't know, sometimes maybe it's true or not, but there's a pretext that's what you just said. There's a pretext, but there was a preset goal to conquer.
Yeah,
that's a different story.
I see your point, and I think your point is very good. At the same time, I don't believe that those two motivations, the imperial motivation and this metaphysical motivation, if you want, this kind of dualistic motivation, are not compatible with one another. They are compatible, because you can expand an empire just for the sake of the empire, as many did and many do or want to do, right? Or you can do this with the idea that, well, I actually expand the goodness in the world. I make the world better, a better thing. I think Putin believes that it's not just the expansion of the Russian zone of influence, of political influence, the kind of wrestling between the empires in the 19th century. It's not just that. I think he may believe, but again, it's difficult to read his mind. It's my hypothesis that I do about his motivation, this metaphysical, quasi-religious motivation, that he believes that by expanding the Russian Empire, he makes the world a better place. He improves the world. It's very similar to what the communists did in the 20th century. They believed that by spreading the communist ideology across the world, to Africa, to Asia, by setting up and supporting puppet regimes in different countries, they do the good thing. They make the world better.
Father Kirill, Ruski Mir, I don't know if the folks at home are familiar with this, but it's kind of this idea that it literally means Russian world, not to be confused with Russian peace.
It's not Pax Russica. No,
it's Russian world.
It's rather the opposite.
Really, to spread Russian culture. This is what I don't understand about it, right? Because there's an idea to unify actually Russians that are spread out, and Russian languages to be fostered. It's like, fostering basically Russian culture. But what I don't understand about this, it's not the same as the idea of spreading American democracy, right? That has obviously also had its misfires, and America's not loved for this in some parts of the world. However, American culture actually did spread to the point where everybody anywhere on the globe wears jeans, everywhere, anywhere on the globe listens to
Hollywood
music, movies. This is not something we're even seeing China do. People aren't eating with 2 sticks instead of forks because they've realized that there's a better way of eating than with chopsticks. They don't watch Chinese movies, except now I notice on airplanes. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. One does see Chinese movies, but Russian culture, I don't see it as being very exportable. At least it hasn't caught on in ways that everybody's learning Russian, and so this idea that for the first time, actually, I'm hearing in Africa, there was the pretext now that's been offered. I think I'm sorry, everybody, if you're being offended by this, but there is this pretext of we're concerned that they don't have nice churches. We're going to build better churches because the Greeks.
I wish they could. I don't believe they will do. But anyways, it's.
But, we're trying to get to the bottom of, is there this, what is behind this expansionism? It's very interesting that you're saying we truly believe as Russian Orthodox that we're bringing better life? Or is it just mystic?
Well, the true life. I remember, some priests in Moscow saying that we are the center of the world. Why? It's very simple. Because Orthodoxy is the only true religion. We in Moscow are the center of this true religion. Therefore, very simply, we are the center of the world. That is the equation. And many people believe it. And I think Putin came to believe somehow the same things. And this he learned, I think, from the church. Actually, Putin has learned a lot of things from the church, not just language that he speaks. He increasingly speaks, the church, he learned from this doctrine of the Russian world, which has been produced by the church. He also, in this address, I want to come back to his address on the 21st of February, he also spoke about, protecting Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy in Ukraine. He has the church in his mind, but not as a Christian, I believe, but as a manipulator, as someone who uses those ideas. And certainly, yes, he has been infected by this imperial ideology, which sometimes is hardly distinguishable from Christianity per se, from the church per se.
Well, I want to get back.
And it is different.
I'm glad that you're pointing out before we finish this fascinating conversation, why don't we remember what is the spread of Christianity? What was Christianity itself spreading? Say, if we go back to the very beginning, what were the apostles spreading? Were they building nicer churches or churches at all for people? Or were they setting up wherever people already had homes? Wasn't the first thing, I'm obviously answering my own question, wasn't the first thing that they were spreading was the good news? One doesn't hear even in this Ruski Mir
that's exactly the point.
Or in Africa, I'll just finish this. Or in Africa, I didn't hear in all of these posts and about bringing,
not about Christ. It's not about Christ.
No, it's about bringing an unseemens, which they seem to need in order for them to get also money or a church or a church floor. But I didn't hear about bringing the light of Christ to them. Do we presume that there's already, everybody's converted?
Exactly. They're going to preach to the choir.
Back to the cross. When the apostles spread the message, didn't they cause a lot of people to die as martyrs in the end because they were spreading a message that was not going to make them successful in this life? Yeah. They spread a message that was very dangerous at the time and did not bring people, wealth, fitness, prosperity. So isn't our message as Orthodox of the cross, right?
That's exactly it. I think it's a very good point, and I completely concur with you. And that is exactly the point about the Russian world. The Russian world, even though it uses the vehicle of Orthodoxy, it is vested sometimes in the vestments of Orthodoxy, in the vocabulary of the Orthodox theology. It does not bring Orthodoxy. It brings a political ideology. And you mentioned at the beginning, I just want to also to make a very short remark on what you've said before, that yes, for some people, the Russian world, which is not Pax Russica, it's the opposite. It doesn't bring peace in contrast to Pax Romana, whatever. But the point of the Russian world is it's not just culture. Yes, they tried at some stages. And they even established a fund, which is called Russian World. By the way,
they established a what?
A foundation run actually by the grandson of Molotov, quite surprisingly. And the purpose of that foundation was to disseminate the Russian culture, like Russian literature, language, and so forth. But they realized it's not enough. And as you rightly pointed out, you cannot sell the Russian language or culture widely to the world. What they try to do instead is to sell values. They call it traditional values.
All right.
Essentially, it's about, and again, it's an ideology, a form of ideology. It's a conservative ideology, Republican ideology, if you want, in the United States. In different countries, it has different names. And they try to promote themselves, to sell themselves through these values. They also use the church. They may use the church, like in Africa, they do. They use the church, religion to justify their aggression against Ukraine. They essentially say, look, in Ukraine, the godless West, the heretical West, comes to consume this poor country, our brethren, with whom they say we are the same people, right? They want to destroy them spiritually, and we are going to save them by going to fight against, actually, what they perceive as the West. Bombing them and killing them and so forth. This is also the Russian world. It's not about just language, because to my understanding, I've been to the front line. I know a lot of people who fought from the Ukrainian side. Many of them, if not most of them, they speak Russian. So it's not about Russian language. It's not about literature. It's really about, and it's not even about values. It's about, yes, the promotion of what they call the Russian civilization, and it's an imperial project. So imperial project vested in religious terms, vested in ideological terms, vested in it can have different forms. But my point, and I want to come back to this point, that Putin is motivated, because a lot of people ask the question, what is in the head of Mr. Putin? They try to read his brain. My reading of his brain, my reading of his motivation is metaphysical, and it's a very bad metaphysics, evil metaphysics.
Right, that we equal good and they equal bad. But because being Russian is also a certain nationality, it does depend on blood lineage. Does this smell a little bit of some kind of a more pure, superior race to other?
Well, I believe so. I believe so very much. Well, at least from my years of living in Moscow, even, and after that, I lived quite a few years in the United States. And they say in the United States, they have systemic racism, whatever. Well, they don't know about the systemic racism in Russia. How poor people, from the Russian minorities, from the Caucasus region, how they feel and how they are mistreated often. And well, yes, I don't want to, accuse and to judge people. I don't believe in the sincerity of the anti-racist rhetoric of those who went to Africa to evangelize, the local Orthodoxy into the Russian Orthodoxy. I don't believe that they are anti-racist. Just the opposite. We will see it.
Right. I mean, it's unfortunate, and maybe we as Orthodox, it's certainly not a matter of, trying to accuse somebody of something, because all of us as Orthodox carry responsibility for a very long, I think, inheritance and perpetuation of certain ways of dealing with the state, and especially in our in certain home countries. And this is a trap, I think, that we haven't been able to come out of in certain. Okay, я все это вырежу, because I don't even know.
No, that's good. If you allow me to say one more thing about this, I think what we are dealing in the case of the Russian world, it's a sort of exceptionalism. Yes, we know about the American exceptionalism, right? That we are the city upon the hill. We are an exceptional nation with a global mission. Well, Putin tries to think in similar terms. I would not equate those kind of ways of thinking, but what Putin promotes, it's a sort of civilization exceptionalism. I call it civilizational nationalism. Yes, he criticizes nationalism. He Even he justifies his war in Ukraine as waged for the sake of denazification, as he says, fighting against nationalism. What he suggests is essentially a civilizational nationalism, very violent, brutal, killing, murderous. And what he's doing in Ukraine, it's not nationalism really. Yes, there are nationalists in Ukraine. Yes, there are, but I don't believe they constitute the majority. What Ukraine is heading to is the creation of the civil society, a very strong civil society that is beyond national identity. Yes, they respect the national identity. Yes, they embrace some kind of healthy national identity. Many people whom I know in Ukraine, who are probably believed to be nationalists, they are against nationalism because they believe in the power of the society, that we the people, we the citizens, regardless of what language we speak, regardless of what national background we have, either we are Jewish or Tatars, Muslims or Ukrainians or Russians, we are the people. We are the citizens, and that's what unites us. That is exactly I would say, the political mainstream in Ukraine, something that Putin doesn't stomach. Yes, under the guise of nationalism, he says this is nationalism, but this is not. What he really fights, what he really fears is the people, the civil society. That's why he tries to eliminate civil society in Russia. That's why he throws to prison people like Navalny and many other activists, not just like Navalny. That's why he tries to destroy Ukraine, because it is an existential threat to him, not just to his imperial thinking, not just to the Russian Empire, but to this very kind of vertical way of thinking that I, as a ruler, I know much better than the people what they want, what they need.
Yes.
I don't believe in the people. I believe in the leadership, my own. I am Louis XIV. That is essentially his ideology. And what Ukraine suggests is we, the people, matter much more than our rulers. And this is the existential threat to Putin's regime.
Right. Thank you so much, Father Kirill. I think that has, of course, implications for the very content, the very heart of Christ's teaching in our lives. I mean, there is a deeply anti-Christian, there's a deeply anti-the cross, the way of the cross, element to the kind of respect for just hard force, hard power, as expressed in military power or even money. To come to a place like Africa and say, we can offer more money is deeply anti-Christian.
Oh yeah.
Without
this
any
is the classical proselytism that the Russian church, accuses other churches of. They proselytize because they buy out, our folks. That they do the same in Africa, exactly.
We've always, classically, there's been an observation, that certain other Western denominations.
Well, they did proselytism.
Money.
Exactly. Well, they did, and they do proselytism. Yeah. The point is that the Russian church, while accusing those churches of proselytism, is doing the same. Exactly as while accusing like the ecumenical patriarchate, the Patriarchate of Alexandria, of violating canons, which I believe is not violating of canons. They do the same. They do worse things. They violate, the very basic canons of our tradition.
Yes. That's, it goes to the very gospel message. But, when we end up finding ourselves in this world, in our globalized world, the most noticeable conflict now is Orthodox against Orthodox.
Exactly.
And that has been it. A very similar thing happened with Georgia, the country, right?
Exactly.
Not the state. And that was Russia versus Georgia. Georgian people, if you talk to Georgian Orthodox people, a lot of them are still very traumatized about this and think about and are observing the Ukraine situation with horror, saying nobody noticed really when it happened.
Exactly.
Nobody stopped him then. Now it keeps going,
And we in Ukraine appreciate the example because now we are better prepared because of the Georgian war, because of the traumatic experiences in Georgia, we are now better prepared for the same kind of war that Russia wages. And I also need to remind that the only wars in Europe, they happened in the 21st century, were the wars between the Orthodox peoples.
Right. Like the
Russia, Georgia, and
Russia,
Russia,
Georgia,
Ukraine.
and Russia, Ukraine, exactly. All right, Father Kirill, but we're not going to end on a negative note. I think it's a wake-up call, is the way I'm looking at this, to us, each person, in Orthodoxy, not some bishop or patriarch, or, you know what I'm saying? I think that the only I realize that you in Ukraine have this terrible podvig of also picking up arms and defending your country. God bless you, and I feel just heartbroken for all of you. But as for those of us watching out there, my friends, I'm simply sharing my thought that I think it's a wake-up call to us. Have we put, perhaps as church, some kind of not exactly Christian ideologies above what is actually supposed to be in our hearts, the way of the cross, and actually Jesus Christ as our primary King and God, right? Is there a surrogate, some other form, whether it's the ideology of family values, which I'm not saying anything against family, but there's
promoted mostly by monks and divorced leaders, even if they are, if they were married.
I hate to bring it up, but National Socialism, as in the Nazis, were very big on having, women having many babies. They were very big on family values, specifically for the German, people to reproduce. Big on family,
and they were also, they were also big on the state. And there are very clear parallels between the ideologies of the 30s interwar period, when the churches essentially aligned, and not just the Protestant or Catholic Church, but the Orthodox churches aligned with their own dictatorships, fascist regimes in the countries like Romania, like Serbia, and so forth. And now we have the revival, the resurgence of the same kind of ideologies, that without learning our lessons from the period before the war.
Yes, and it's why it's also disturbing to have another aspect of pre-World War II German expansionism. There's Anschluss of this land, of this beautiful Austrian land, the Anschluss, which is the annexation of Austria, how it was greeted, how there was also this rhetoric of the German-speaking people here. They're supposed to belong to Germany because they're also German-speaking. For anyone who doesn't know, they also
the same exactly happened in Crimea. Yeah, there's a clear parallel between Crimea.
Yeah, there's an argumentation. That's also our people. We should be one nation. It's disturbing to people in Europe to observe this expansionism because of parallels people have not forgotten. That everybody's watching as this happens, and it seems like there is somebody not very healthy in the head that's doing this expansionism, and is this going to come out into a full-blown war? But we have the way of the cross, my friends, that is the weapon of peace. The weapon of peace, оружие мира, right?
Exactly,
Father Kirill, thank you so much for your precious time right now. You have donated to us, contributed. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Reminding everyone, do go to this link. We have in the pre-Lenten season a sale on our beautiful mugs that you see a picture of here, our 2022 mug, Faith versus Fear, every day of the year. It's a fun mug. We have our Healthy Fast Lenten guidebook available for you with reflections for every day of Lent and meal plans for every day of Lent. If you run out of ideas, or if you don't really know how to do Lent, the season of renewal and of wellness, both physical and spiritual. And we have the little Lenten book. Anyway, go to our website, check out the gift shop. It's a way to support our coffee headquarters, and check out our weekly podcast. I continue to write my book on the theology of time, and I'm excited to finish it within the next, I don't know, it's going to be finished within the near future.
And I look forward to reading it. very much.
Yeah, Father Kirill has seen parts of it. I have a whole.
Well, I should say it's going to be a great book. I really advise you to consider buying it and reading it.
It's about praying the hours and days according to tradition. So it doesn't sound that interesting perhaps right now, but it is. It's going to be, I hope, a useful book for some of you. All right, everybody, that's it. A happy upcoming Lenten season. If I don't chat with you before that, but you can always tune in to our weekly podcast for now. I'm doing it only once a week for now while I write the book at patreon.com/Sister Vassa. Okay, I'm opening it up also to non-subscribers for a while already. Okay, so join us there. You can get the whole rundown. I do an overview of the whole upcoming week liturgically, and I will be accompanying anybody who wants to tune in throughout the beautiful Lenten season. That's it. Let's give a round of applause to Father Kirill. Let's pray for all of our beloved friends and those we don't know who are now suffering under this terrible tragedy. All right, everybody, that's it for me. Father Kirill, will you say goodbye to our viewers?
Yes, all the best to all your viewers, and I also wish you strength and to prepare yourselves well for the upcoming Lenten period. May God bless you.
Thank you, Father Kirill. Bye, everyone.